My brother was a golden child, and I was an invisible one, until he emptied their bank accounts and vanished. Now my parents expect me to pick up the pieces. Growing up in the Patterson household, I learned the quiet art of invisibility before I learned how to ride a bike. My brother, Vincent, was born 3 years after me, and from the moment he took his first breath, it was as if the universe tilted on its axis to revolve around him. He was the baby, the boy, the one my father could toss in the air and catch, the one my mother dressed in tiny sailor suits and photographed endlessly. I existed in the periphery, a helpful ghost who knew how to fetch diapers, warm bottles, and later make myself small when the praise was being handed out. Our house in the sleepy suburban sprawl of Northern Virginia was a place where the walls seemed to absorb the sounds of Vincent's laughter and amplify my silences. He was the one who got the new bicycle for his 6th birthday, while I was told my old one was perfectly fine and could be repainted. He was the one who got the gaming console, the designer sneakers, the summer camp trips to the mountains. I got hand-me-down from cousins I barely knew and a library card that my mother signed for me with a shrug, saying, "At least you like to read. That's cheap." I remember once, when I was 11, I came home with a science fair trophy. First place, regional. I had built a working model of a hydraulic arm out of syringes and wood, spending weeks in the garage, cutting my fingers on the edges of plastic tubing. I walked in the door, the gold plastic figure gleaming in my palm, and my mother glanced up from the kitchen table, where she was helping Vincent with his spelling homework. "That's nice, honey," she said, her eyes already back on his worksheet. Vincent sounded out, received. My father came home that evening, saw the trophy on the counter, and nodded. "Good job, kid." Then he turned to Vincent, who had just learned to ride his bike without training wheels, and swept him up in a celebratory whirl that ended with ice cream for everyone. Ice cream that tasted like ash in my mouth. Though I smiled and thanked him, I learned early that achievement was not a currency that held value in our home. The only currency was Vincent's happiness. When we got older, the pattern didn't change. It only became more expensive. Vincent wanted to play hockey, which required gear that cost more than my first car would years later. My parents signed him up for the elite travel team, driving him to rinks across 3 states while I took the city bus to my part-time job at a bookstore. When I mentioned that I'd like to try out for the school debate team, which only required a bus pass and a willingness to argue, my mother said, "We just don't have the time to drive you to meets, and it's not like it's a real career path." College applications arrived like grenades in the mail. I had saved money from working 30 hours a week during my senior year, but it was barely enough for application fees. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where Vincent had been celebrated for spelling cat, and explained that they had spent most of their savings on Vincent's hockey and tutoring. "He's not as naturally academic as you," my father said, as if being naturally academic was a curse that meant I should fund my own future. "You've always been so independent. You'll figure it out." I did figure it out. I took out loans, applied for every scholarship I could find, and worked 3 jobs during my undergrad. I called home once a week, and most calls lasted less than 10 minutes. My mother would update me on Vincent, his grades, his hockey stats, his girlfriend. When I told her I'd been promoted to a manager at my job, she said, "That's nice, honey. Vincent just got into a fraternity. Can you believe it? He's making so many friends." When my maternal grandmother passed away during my junior year, she left a modest inheritance to be split between her grandchildren. My mother took control of it. After all, she was the executor, and I assumed I'd receive my portion when I turned 21. Instead, I found out through a casual comment from Vincent that she had used his half to pay for his study abroad semester in Barcelona and a little extra for his rent. When I asked my mother about my half, she sighed as if I were being difficult. "I put it in a savings account for you, but I figured you wouldn't mind if I used a little to help your brother. He really needed this experience to find himself. I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for my own rent and tuition. I hadn't had a vacation in 3 years. But I said nothing, because saying something had never changed anything. Vincent graduated with a degree in communications and a portfolio of photographs from Barcelona that my parents framed and hung in their living room. I graduated with a degree in finance, magna cum laude, and my parents sent me a card with a check for $50 and a note that said, "We're so proud of you. Wish you could have walked with your class. But we understand you had to work." I didn't walk. I had a job interview that day. The years that followed were a blur of quiet resentment and dutiful distance. I built a career in financial consulting, rising through the ranks with a kind of relentless work ethic that comes from knowing no one is going to hand you anything. I bought a small condo, paid off my loans, and learned to take satisfaction in my own solitude. I dated, but never seriously. I had spent so long being secondary in my own family that I wasn't sure I knew how to be primary in anyone else's life. Vincent, meanwhile, floated. He had a series of jobs: marketing assistant, event planner, something involving a startup that sold artisanal pickles, none of which lasted more than a year. But my parents never worried. They would tell me, "He's just finding his path," or "He's a late bloomer." When I pointed out that he was 26 and still living in their basement, my mother said, "At least he's saving money." Saving money, of course, was not what he was doing. The first sign that something was wrong came when my father called me on a Tuesday afternoon, a day and time he never called. His voice was different, smaller, like air leaking from a tire. "Your mother and I need to talk to you. Can you come over tonight?" I drove to their house, a colonial-style home that had always felt too big for the three of us and now seemed cavernous. My mother was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale. My father stood by the window, looking out at the street as if he might see something coming. "We found out yesterday," my mother said. "Vincent, he took money." I sat down across from her. "What kind of money?" She began to cry, which she never did. Not at funerals, not when my grandmother died, not when I told her I'd been in a car accident and was fine. Our accounts, our retirement. He had access because I gave him access a few years ago when he was struggling, and I never took it off. I trusted him. My father turned from the window. He cleaned us out, almost everything. The savings, the investment accounts, the emergency fund. He's been taking over the last 18 months. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. I felt the room tilt. "How much?" My mother whispered the number. It was a number that made me understand why my father looked like he was watching for something that had already hit them. "And he's gone," she added. "We tried to call him. His phone is disconnected. He moved out last week. Said he was going to stay with a friend, but his room is empty. Everything is gone." I sat there, the financial consultant in me calculating, the daughter in me just empty. Where did it go? They didn't know. They had spent weeks piecing it together. Withdrawals, transfers, purchases, a new car, a deposit on an apartment in Manhattan, a woman named Simone, whom they had never met, who appeared on Vincent's Instagram feed wearing clothes that looked expensive. Vincent had been living a double life, not in their basement, but in a penthouse of lies funded by their future. He left a note, my father said, and his voice cracked. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, unfolded it with shaking hands, and read, "I know you'll be angry, but this is my life. I can't keep waiting for it to start. You always said you wanted me to be happy. This is what makes me happy." My mother looked at me with eyes that were raw and red. He said we always wanted him to be happy, as if that was permission, as if we gave him permission to steal our lives. I wanted to say I told you so. I wanted to scream it from the rafters of that house. to let it echo in every room where my achievements had been dismissed and his mediocrity had been celebrated. But looking at them, at my mother's trembling hands, at my father's sudden stoop, I felt only a cold, tired grief. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "We can't afford to retire," my mother said. "We can't afford the house. We can barely afford the property taxes this year." She paused, and I saw something shift in her expression, a calculation that looked familiar. "We were hoping you're doing well, aren't you? You have that condo. You have savings." I leaned back in my chair, the wood pressing into my spine. "You want me to help you?" "We're your parents," my father said, and the words landed like stones. "We raised you. We gave you everything." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a short, hollow sound that made my mother flinch. "You gave me nothing. You gave me the message, over and over, that I was second, that I didn't matter, that Vincent was the one who deserved everything. And now that he's taken it all and left, you're looking at me like I'm the safety net." "That's not fair," my mother said, but her voice was weak. "We always loved you. He needed more help." "He needed more help," I repeated, tasting the words. "He needed a new car at 16. He needed tuition for a private university he dropped out of. He needed your retirement to fund his girlfriend's shopping habits. And I needed a mother who saw my science fair trophy. I needed a father who didn't act like my independence was a convenience for him." Silence filled the room like water. My father sat down heavily on the arm of the couch, his face gray. I stood up. "I'm not going to fix this for you. I'll help you find a financial advisor. I'll help you downsize, sell the house, figure out what you can salvage. But I'm not going to pay for Vincent's betrayal. I'm not going to be the daughter you remember exists only when the son you actually love isn't available." I walked out of that house with my hands shaking, and I didn't look back. For the next 3 months, I kept my promise. I helped them find a certified financial planner who specialized in elder fraud. I went with them to the bank, to the police station, though they refused to press charges because he's still our son. I helped them list the house, pack boxes, sort through decades of accumulated life. I did it with a cold efficiency that I recognized as a survival mechanism, the same one that had got me through childhood. But the emotional demands crept in like fog. My mother started calling me multiple times a day, not to ask for help with the financial logistics, but to talk, to tell me she was lonely, to ask why I didn't visit more often, to mention casually that she wished she had a daughter who cared enough to check in. My father, who had never asked me for anything except to be less inconvenient, suddenly needed me to drive him to doctor's appointments, to help him set up his new email account, to explain the paperwork for the sale of the house. "You're so good at this stuff," he'd say, as if my proficiency was a gift I owed him. Then came the conversation that changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had driven to their new apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom in a building that smelled of boiled cabbage and old carpet, to help them unpack. My mother was in the kitchen, arranging dishes she'd had for 30 years, and my father was sitting at the small dining table, a checkbook open in front of him. "We've been thinking," he said, without preamble. "We talked to the financial advisor. With the sale of the house and what we have left, we're going to have a small surplus. Not enough for retirement, but enough to help you." I stopped, a stack of plates in my hands. "Help me?" My mother came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "We were wrong," she said, and for a moment I thought I heard something genuine in her voice. "We should have treated you better. We should have given you what we gave Vincent. And now that we want to make it right." My father slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a bank statement. "We want to give you what's left. Not all of it. We need something to live on, but a significant portion. Consider it an inheritance in advance. A way to make up for the years we overlooked you." I looked at the number. It wasn't enormous. Vincent had taken most of what they had, but it was more money than they had ever offered me, more than they had spent on my entire education, my entire childhood. What's the catch? I asked because there was always a catch. My mother exchanged a glance with my father. No catch. We just were getting older. Our health isn't what it used to be. We want to know that we have someone we can count on, someone who will be there for us. And Vincent won't be, I said. She didn't deny it. We've accepted that. He's not coming back. He made his choice. But you've always been reliable. We just want you to be there. That's all. I sat down slowly, the plates forgotten. You're offering me money to be your caretaker. We're offering you money because we love you, my father said, but his voice was too quick, too rehearsed. And we want to make sure you're taken care of. We want you to know that we're thinking of you. I looked at the bank statement again. I thought about my student loans, finally paid off. I thought about my condo, which was small and needed repairs. I thought about the vacations I had never taken, the things I had never allowed myself to want because I had learned so thoroughly that wanting was a waste of energy. And I thought about Vincent, who had taken everything and walked away without looking back. I'll think about it, I said. Over the next few weeks, I did think about it. I thought about it while I was at work, while I was driving, while I was lying awake at 3 a.m. staring at my ceiling. My parents didn't pressure me. For once, they seemed to understand that pushing would only make me retreat. Instead, they waited, and their patience was almost more unsettling than their demands would have been. In the end, I accepted the money. I told myself it was practical. They were going to give it to me whether I asked for it or not. And if I refused, they'd probably find some way to give it to Vincent when he eventually came crawling back. At least if I took it, I could use it wisely, invest it, save it, put it toward a future I had always built alone. But I also knew deep down that I was testing them. I wanted to see if they could give me something without asking for something in return. I wanted to believe that maybe in their own flawed way, they were trying to change. They weren't. The day after the money was transferred to my account, my mother called to ask if I could come over and help her with her online banking. I'm just so confused by the new system, she said. And since you're so good with money now, the week after that, my father's car wouldn't start, and I was the one he called to drive him to the mechanic. Then it was the grocery shopping, because my mother's back was bothering her. Then it was a prescription pickup, the tax appointment, the phone call with the insurance company that had been holding for too long. Each request was small. Each request was reasonable. And each request came with a reminder, implicit or explicit, of what they had given me. After everything we've done for you, my mother said once, when I hesitated to take a day off work to drive her to a specialist 3 hours away. She caught herself, saw my face, and added quickly, I mean, the money, you know we're grateful you accepted it. We just thought, family helps family. I was becoming their full-time daughter, the one they had never wanted, until the one they did want proved to be a fraud. And the money, which I had thought of as a gift, was beginning to feel like a leash. The breaking point came 3 months later. I had been promoted at work, a senior role that required travel and long hours. I was proud of it. I had earned it the way I had earned everything. But my parents didn't see it that way. When I told them I would be out of town for 2 weeks, my mother's face crumpled like paper. What are we supposed to do? She asked. What if something happens? You'll call a neighbor or a service. There are people you can hire. We don't want to hire people, my father said. We want you. That's why we gave you the money, so you'd be available when we needed you. I stopped mid-pour of a glass of water. You gave me the money so I'd be available? We gave it to you because you're our daughter, my mother said, but her voice was thin. And daughters take care of their parents. I set the glass down carefully, as if it might shatter. You didn't give Vincent money so he'd take care of you. You gave him money so he could do whatever he wanted. You gave me money so I do what you want." My father stood up from his chair, his face reddening. "Vincent was a mistake. We're trying to fix that. We're trying to include you. Why can't you just accept that?" "Because this is inclusion," I said, and my voice was louder than I intended. "This is a transaction. You lost your golden child, so now you're trying to buy the other one. But I'm not for sale. I never was." I walked out of their apartment that day, and for the first time in my life, I didn't answer their calls for a week. During that week, I did something I had never allowed myself to do. I let myself be angry, not the quiet, swallowing anger I carried since childhood, but the loud, righteous kind that demanded to be felt. I sat in my condo, surrounded by the silence I had built for myself, and I thought about every birthday I had watched from the sidelines, every achievement that had been met with nod while Vincent got a parade. Every time I had been told I was strong enough to handle it, while Vincent was coddled and protected. And I realized with a clarity that felt like breaking glass that I had been waiting my whole life for them to see me, and they never would, not because I was invisible, but because they had trained themselves not to look. When I finally called them back, my mother's voice was small and careful. "We're sorry," she said. "We didn't mean to make you feel like we were buying you. We don't know how to do this differently." "I know," I said, "and that's why I'm going to help you find a different way." I told them, calmly and clearly, what I was willing to do and what I was not. I would help them find resources, a geriatric care manager, a home health aide, a financial planner who could help them budget for their own care. I would visit once a week, and I would be available for emergencies, but I would not be their on-call assistant. I would not put my career, my life, or my sanity on hold to fill the hole Vincent had left. They argued. They cried. My father said I was being cold, and my mother asked if I really wanted to abandon them after everything. But I held my ground. "This isn't about abandoning you," I said. "This is about not setting myself on fire to keep you warm. You have to figure out how to take care of yourselves, the same way I had to figure out how to take care of myself. I'm here. I'm not leaving. But I'm not going to be your replacement for the child you actually wanted." The silence on the other end of the phone was long and heavy. And then, for the first time in my life, I heard my mother say something I never expected. "You're right," she whispered. "You're right, and I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't undo decades of neglect or suddenly heal the wounds that had calcified over the years. But it was something, a crack in the wall I had spent my life trying to climb. Over the next 6 months, we built something new. It wasn't the family I had dreamed of as a child, the one where I was seen and celebrated and loved without condition, but it was honest. I helped them hire a part-time aide who came 3 days a week to help with errands and appointments. I visited on Sundays, bringing groceries and sitting with my mother while she showed me old photo albums that still had more pictures of Vincent than of me, but at least she was pointing them out, acknowledging the imbalance. My father, who had never known how to talk to me without an agenda, started asking about my work. Real questions, not just polite placeholders. He listened when I talked about a difficult client, and once he said, "I always knew you'd be successful. You had that fire." I didn't point out that he had never said that before. I just let it sit between us, a small offering. Vincent, meanwhile, had become a ghost. We heard through a cousin that he and Simone had broken up, that he was living in a studio apartment in Brooklyn, working at a bike shop. He called my parents once on my father's birthday, and my mother handed the phone to my father without saying a word. I don't know what was said. When my father hung up, his face was closed, and he didn't mention the call. I didn't ask. The betrayal was theirs to carry. 6 months after that conversation, I sat with my parents in their small apartment. eating takeout Chinese food from the place around the corner. My mother was laughing at something my father said, a joke about his new neighbor who watered his plants at 2 a.m., and the sound of it, ordinary and unguarded, made something loosen in my chest. I looked at them, these two people who had spent my childhood looking past me, and I saw something I hadn't let myself see before. They were flawed. Deeply, profoundly flawed. But they were also old and tired and trying, in their stumbling way, to make something out of the wreckage they had created. I wasn't their favorite. I never would be. Vincent would always be the child they had poured themselves into, the one who had broken them. I was the other one, the one who had learned to live without them. But I was there, and for now that was enough. The money they had given me sat in an investment account, untouched. I hadn't decided what to do with it. Part of me wanted to use it for a down payment on a bigger place. Part of me wanted to donate it. Part of me wanted to hold on to it as a reminder that I was worth something, even if they hadn't always seen it. What I did know was that I was no longer waiting for their approval. I had stopped being the invisible child somewhere along the way. Not because they had finally seen me, but because I had finally seen myself. And that, I realized, was the inheritance I had always deserved.